Hi, I'm Emma Chen. 3 years ago, at my own wedding reception, my mother-in-law Victoria leaned close and whispered, "James could have married into real money, not someone who needed to check price tags." Her diamond bracelet caught the light as she patted my hand with false sympathy. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled and walked away, champagne untouched. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Last week, the Wilson family hosted their annual Healthcare Innovation Summit at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, fully sponsored by my $40 million company. The look on Victoria's face when she saw my name on the welcome banner? That's what we're talking about today. The string quartet was playing something classical and expensive sounding when I first noticed the whispers. Our wedding reception was at the Wilson family's country club. James's parents insisted and, of course, paid for everything. The venue overlooked the Boston Harbor, white roses and hydrangeas everywhere, crystal chandeliers reflecting off the polished marble floors. It was beautiful, exactly what they wanted, nothing like what I would have chosen. I was standing near the dessert table, taking a momentary breather from greeting guests I'd never met before, when I heard Victoria's voice carrying from behind a floral arrangement. And we offered a prenup, of course. James refused. You know how these girls from nowhere can be so persuasive. A polite titter of laughter followed. I froze, the petit four halfway to my mouth. My cream silk dress suddenly felt too tight, too warm, too everything. The woman who'd just become my mother-in-law hadn't noticed me standing there. I set the dessert down untouched and straightened my shoulders. "Emma!" Victoria exclaimed when she spotted me, her voice rising an octave. "We were just talking about how lovely everything turned out, don't you think?" Her friends, all perfect, blowouts and tennis bracelets, smiled with teeth but not eyes. "Everything is beautiful," I said quietly. "Thank you for hosting." Victoria reached out and adjusted my necklace, a simple pearl pendant that had belonged to my grandmother. "So sweet and quaint. Maybe for your first anniversary, James can get you something from Tiffany." She smiled. "We Wilsons have certain standards to maintain." There it was, the same message I'd been receiving since James first brought me home to Beacon Hill. Not good enough, not wealthy enough, not Wilson enough. I'd grown up in Lakeville, Connecticut, not exactly hardscrabble, but worlds away from the Wilsons' old money Boston life. My parents owned a small pharmacy that served the community. We lived comfortably, but vacations meant road trips, not summers in the Hamptons. I had worked after school, earned scholarships to Boston University, and graduated with honors in biochemistry and business. None of that seemed to matter to the Wilsons. They only saw where I came from, not where I was going. James appeared at my side, his hand warm against the small of my back. "Everything okay here?" His eyes searched mine, knowing his mother too. "Well?" "Just girl talk," Victoria said, waving him off. "Now go mingle with the Haverford boys. They're all dying to hear about the new position." James had recently made junior partner at a prestigious law firm. The right pedigree, the right career, the right everything. Everything except his choice of wife. At the end of the night, as we said goodbye to the last guests, Victoria pulled me in for an air kiss. "Welcome to the family, dear. I'm sure you'll adjust." Her eyes flicked to my simple wedding band. James had insisted on buying it himself rather than using the Wilson family heirloom. "Remember, a Wilson wife has responsibilities, standards. I do hope you're up for it." That night in our hotel suite, as James slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. I would never beg for Victoria Wilson's approval. I would never become what she wanted. And I would never, ever let her see me break. 2 months later, I quit my research position at Massachusetts General Hospital. James was supportive but confused. "I thought you loved your lab work. he said over dinner in our new Cambridge apartment, a place we'd chosen together, deliberately 20 minutes from Beacon Hill. I did, I explained, excitement making my voice rise. But I've been developing something on the side, a digital platform that connects patients in clinical trials directly with researchers. It eliminates so many barriers, speeds up enrollment, and gives patients more agency in their treatment journeys. I spread my business plan across our small dining table, notes and projections I'd been working on for months before the wedding. There's a huge gap in the market. The technology exists, but nobody's connecting it properly. I want to build this, James. I think it could really matter. What I didn't tell him was how the idea had crystallized the night of our wedding. As Victoria had dismissed me with her eyes, I'd realized I would never earn her respect by trying to fit into the Wilson world. I needed to create my own. James studied my notes, his lawyer's mind working through the details. This is actually brilliant, Em, but startups need capital. Have you thought about how to fund it? I've been talking to angel investors. My old professor introduced me to a few. I've got 3 meetings next week. I hesitated. I don't want to ask your family for anything. His expression softened. I wouldn't expect you to. This should be yours, completely. He squeezed my hand. Just tell me how I can help. Sunday dinner at the Wilson estate became a special kind of torture. Each week, Victoria found new ways to remind me of my outsider status. Emma, darling, do you need me to show you how to hold the fish knife? Again? Or, Emma's not used to aged wines, Richard. Perhaps she'd prefer something sweeter? James would tense beside me, sometimes speaking up, sometimes staying silent. I knew it put him in an impossible position, caught between his new wife and the family he'd never stood against. I tried not to resent the times he said nothing. Victoria had been cultivating his need for her approval for 30 years before I came along. 6 months after the wedding, I secured my first round of seed funding, $250,000 from a healthcare angel investor named Michael Taylor, who'd built and sold 2 successful medical tech companies. The night I signed the papers, I came home vibrating with excitement. We need to celebrate, James insisted, pulling a bottle of champagne from the fridge, a wedding gift we'd been saving. It's just the beginning, I cautioned, even as pride threatened to burst through my chest. I've got a lot to prove. To who? James asked, pouring the bubbling wine. I didn't answer. We both knew. The first year was brutal. I rented a tiny desk in a co-working space near Kendall Square, surrounded by MIT graduates half my age building apps and games. I was the only one working in healthcare tech, the only one over 30, and often the only woman in the room. I worked 14-hour days, coming home to an increasingly empty apartment as James's new position demanded more late nights and weekends. Victoria called it James's unfortunate situation when talking to family friends. I heard through James's cousin that she'd started introducing me as James's wife. She's trying to start some internet business while he supports them. The words stung, especially as our bank account dwindled. I'd put most of my savings into supplementing the seed money, wanting to stretch it as far as possible before seeking more investment. 18 months after our wedding, Horizon Health Tech consisted of me, one part-time developer named Sophia, who believed in the vision enough to work for equity, and a barely functioning prototype. That Sunday at dinner, Victoria was particularly vicious. Richard and I were just discussing James's future at the firm. The managing partners are very traditional, you know. They like wives who support their husbands' careers, not distract from them. Her knife sliced precisely through her roast beef. Perhaps it's time to reconsider this little project of yours, Emma, before it damages James's prospects. I set my fork down gently. My company isn't a hobby, Victoria. Company? She laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. Let's be realistic, dear. Companies make money. Companies have employees and offices. You have— What exactly? A website that doesn't work and a drain on my son's resources. James started to speak, but Richard cut him off. Victoria's concerned about appearances, that's all. The firm's partners' wives are all involved in proper charitable work. Hospital boards, museum galas, not startups. He said the word like it tasted bad. My work is about improving patient outcomes and access to clinical trials, I said. Evenly. I'd call that pretty charitable. Victoria sighed dramatically. You see, James? This attitude, so defensive. If she'd just accept her position and make the best of it, that's enough, Mother. James's voice was quiet but firm. Emma's work is important, and it's her decision, not yours. Not even mine. Victoria's face hardened. Well, I can see who wears the pants in your marriage. The drive home was silent. When we reached our apartment, James apologized. I should have said something sooner. All those dinners, all those comments. It's okay, I said automatically. No, it's not. He ran a hand through his hair. I've been trying to keep the peace, but she's never going to change. And honestly, I don't want you to accept your position or whatever Victorian-era nonsense she's pushing. I laughed despite myself. Victorian-era. Nice pun. He smiled, then grew serious again. I believe in what you're building, Emma. Not just the company. The life you want. The person you are. 2 weeks later, we skipped Sunday dinner. Then, the next. And the next. Victoria left increasingly frosty voicemails, but James didn't waver. Instead, he started coming to my co-working space on Friday evenings, bringing takeout, and helping me review legal documents I couldn't afford to pay. An attorney to handle. The breakthrough came 9 months later. A major hospital system agreed to pilot our patient recruitment platform. The results were beyond even my expectations. Recruitment time cut by 37%. Patient satisfaction scores up by 42%. Michael, my angel investor, helped me secure a meeting with his venture capital connections. The night before the pitch, I sat surrounded by presentation printouts in our living room. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. James came home early, for once, carrying my favorite ramen from the place across town. You need brain food, he announced. And this. He handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny diamond. Nothing flashy. Nothing ostentatious. Just beautiful in its simplicity. I know you're not big on jewelry, he said awkwardly. But I wanted you to have something tomorrow that reminds you I believe in you. That I'm proud of you. I swallowed hard. It's perfect. Nothing like what your mother would choose. He laughed. Exactly the point. The next morning, I walked into a room of 5 investors, all men, all in suits worth more than my first car, and secured $8 million in Series A funding. When I called James with the news, he whooped so loudly his legal assistant came running. That weekend, we received a formal invitation to Olivia Wilson's engagement party. James's sister was marrying a hedge fund manager from a suitable family, and Victoria had planned an extravagant celebration at their country club. We don't have to go, James said, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Despite everything, he missed his family. And Olivia, for all her frostiness toward me, was his little sister. We'll go, I decided. I'm not hiding anymore. The night of the party, I wore a simple black dress, nothing designer but elegant and confident. The diamond on my wrist caught the light as we entered the lavishly decorated club. Victoria spotted us immediately, her smile tightening as she air-kissed both my cheeks. How unexpected to see you both, she said. James, darling, the Cabot boys are by the bar. They've been asking for you. James stayed firmly by my side. Mother, Did you hear Emma's company secured major funding? They're expanding to new office space next month. Victoria's smile didn't falter. How nice. Olivia's fiancé just made junior partner, his family's firm. Very prestigious. Before I could respond, Olivia appeared, champagne in hand. Emma, James told me about your website thing. Getting money from investors is so creative. Like on that Shark Tank show the cleaning lady watches. I smiled. Congratulations on your engagement, Olivia. The ring is stunning. She preened, flashing the enormous diamond. Bradley knows quality. Speaking of which, Mother's arranged for us to look at properties on Beacon Hill next week. Bradley says there's no point renting when you can afford the best. I felt James tense beside me. Our apartment lease was up for renewal, and we'd been discussing whether to continue renting or buy, a decision complicated by needing to stay cash fluid for my business. The best is relative, I said lightly. We're actually looking at lofts in the Seaport district. Better energy for creative work. Victoria sniffed. Creative. Yes. Well, do be careful with all this. Funding. James has a reputation to consider. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, James was unusually quiet. What's wrong? I asked, removing my bracelet. Nothing. Just thinking about what Mother said. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Not about your company, about my reputation. I froze. Does it bother you? What people at the firm might think about me? God, no. He looked up, surprised. I was thinking how twisted it is that she believes I should care more about some old partner's opinions than supporting my wife's dreams. He pulled me close. I'm proud of what you're building, Emma. I just hope I'm not holding you back. Holding me back? What are you talking about? My family, their attitudes, the fact that I didn't stand up to them sooner. He sighed. Sometimes I wonder if you'd be better off without the Wilson baggage. I took his face in my hands. Listen, to me, your family doesn't define you, and they don't define us. We're building something together, and I don't just mean Horizon. The next 2 years were a blur of growth, challenges, breakthroughs, and setbacks. Horizon expanded from 3 employees to 15, then 30. We moved into proper office space. Our platform rolled out to 12 hospital systems, then 27, then over 50. I was invited to speak at healthcare technology conferences. Michael introduced me to his network of industry leaders. James and I bought that loft in the Seaport district, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. We saw his family less and less, limited to major holidays and the occasional obligation we couldn't avoid. Victoria had mostly given up on direct insults, reverting to backhanded compliments and pointed silences. Then came the announcement that, shocked Boston's healthcare community, Horizon Health Tech had secured a $22 million Series B investment round, valuing the company at over $40 million. My photo was in the Boston Business Journal. The headline read, Healthcare Disruptor Emma Chen, Changing How Patients Access Clinical Trials. The morning the news broke, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard Wilson. Congratulations. Impressive. Achievement. Nothing from Victoria. 2 days later, James came home with an odd expression. The Wilson Financial Group is sponsoring the annual Healthcare Innovation Summit next month, he said carefully. Father just called. They want Horizon as a keynote presenter. I stared at him. They want me to speak at their event? Not exactly. James looked uncomfortable. They want Horizon to co-sponsor the event. Full branding, corporate tables, the works. I sat down slowly. Why? Father claims it's to strengthen family business connections, but reading between the lines, he trailed off. They want to associate themselves with Horizon's success, I finished for him, now that we're worth acknowledging. James didn't deny it. You don't have to do it. We can tell them no. I thought about Victoria's dismissal at our wedding, about all the Sunday dinners where I'd been treated like an unfortunate addendum to James's life, about Olivia's condescension and Richard's silence. Actually, I said slowly, I think we should do it, but on my terms. The Fairmont Copley Plaza was transformed for the annual Healthcare Innovation Summit. Elaborate floral arrangements, crystal stemware, white-gloved waitstaff. And everywhere, on the welcome banner, the program, the stage backdrop, the name badges, the Horizon Health Tech logo prominently displayed alongside the much smaller Wilson Financial Group emblem. I stood in the entrance, watching attendees arrive. Healthcare executives, hospital administrators, research directors, technology innovators, all here to discuss the future of patient care. All here, in part, because of what I'd built. Victoria and Richard arrived precisely on time, as always. Victoria wore an expertly tailored navy suit, her expression fixed in what I recognized as her public smile. It faltered when she saw me, and the massive banner behind me. Emma. Her voice was controlled. This is quite the display. The event planners did a wonderful job implementing our branding guidelines, I said pleasantly. As the primary sponsor, we wanted to ensure proper visibility. Richard cleared his throat. Primary sponsor? I believe we discussed co-sponsorship. Did we? My team handled the details. I smiled, gesturing toward the entrance. Your table is front and center. Best view of the stage for my keynote. Victoria's cheeks flushed slightly. You're giving the keynote address? Along with our chief medical officer, we'll be announcing Horizon's new partnership with the National Institutes of Health. I adjusted my simple gold watch, deliberately not the diamond-encrusted piece Victoria would have expected a successful CEO to wear. Don't worry, I'll be sure to acknowledge Wilson Financial Group's contribution. Her eyes narrowed at the diminishment, but before she could respond, James appeared at my side. Mother, father, the welcome reception is starting. Emma needs to greet the hospital directors. He placed his hand at the small of my back, a gesture of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed by Victoria. As we walked away, I could feel her gaze, boring into my back. Not with the dismissal of our wedding day, but with something new. Something I'd never thought to see from Victoria Wilson. Recognition. The event proceeded flawlessly. I delivered my keynote to a standing ovation. Hospital directors who'd never given me the time of day 3 years ago now lined up to speak with me. Researchers whose trials had benefited from our platform shared success stories. Even Olivia, who attended with her husband, seemed subdued, watching the proceedings with a thoughtful expression I'd never seen on her face before. During the closing reception, I found myself momentarily alone at the edge of the ballroom, taking a rare, quiet moment. Daniel, James's younger brother who had always kept a polite distance, approached hesitantly. That was impressive, Emma, he said, surprising me. The platform you've built? It's making a real difference. One of my friend's mom got into a trial. Through your system. Treatment's working. I blinked, genuinely touched. Thank you for telling me that. It's why we do this work. He nodded, then glanced across the room to where Victoria stood with her social circle. Just so you know, not all of us thought you didn't belong. Before I could respond, he slipped away, disappearing into the crowd. Later, as the event wound down, Victoria approached where James and I stood with Michael, my first investor, and now a trusted advisor. Emma, she said, her voice carrying just the slightest tremor. The event was impressive. Thank you, Victoria. She hesitated, clearly struggling with whatever she'd come to say. Perhaps you might consider joining the hospital board I chair. Your expertise would be valuable. 3 years ago, I would have given anything to hear Victoria Wilson acknowledge my value, to be invited into her world as an equal. Now I studied her face, the careful makeup concealing her age, the practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes, the rigid posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime maintaining appearances. "That's very kind," I said evenly. "But my focus right now is expanding Horizon's impact. We're looking at international markets. Perhaps another time." Something flashed in her eyes, disappointment, frustration, perhaps even a grudging respect. She nodded stiffly and moved away. James squeezed my hand. "You know that was probably the closest she'll ever come to an apology." "I know." I watched her rejoin Richard across the room, but I'm not looking for her approval anymore. That night, after the event, James and I walked along the harbor near our loft. The city lights reflected on the dark water, and a cool breeze carried the salt smell of the ocean. 3 years ago, I never imagined this, I admitted. Standing my ground, building something that matters, not just surviving the Wilsons, but thriving despite them, James finished. "I'm sorry they couldn't see your worth from the beginning." I stopped, turning to face the water. I used to think that's what I wanted, for them to see my worth, to prove Victoria wrong. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about them. What was it about then? I thought about the patients who'd found life-saving trials through our platform, the researchers whose work had accelerated because of our technology, the team we'd built, the community we'd created. It was about discovering what I was capable of building when I stopped waiting for permission. I smiled at the memory of Victoria's face when she saw the Horizon banner. Though I have to admit, proving her wrong was a pretty satisfying bonus. James laughed, then grew serious. "You know what the ironic part is? You embody the actual Wilson family values better than any of us. The ones my grandfather used to talk about before status and appearances took over. Determination, innovation, creating something meaningful." As we continued our walk home, I realized the victory wasn't in making Victoria acknowledge me. It wasn't even in the success of Horizon, though that mattered deeply. The real triumph was in the woman I'd become, someone who no longer measured her worth through others' eyes. Someone who built her own table instead of begging for a seat at theirs. That night, as I looked out over the Boston skyline from our loft windows, I thought about all the people watching this video who might be where I was 3 years ago, dismissed, underestimated, made to feel small by those who should have lifted them up. I wanted to tell them what I wish someone had told me. Your value isn't determined by those who fail to see it. The people who dismiss you don't get to define what you're capable of building. And sometimes, the greatest satisfaction isn't in proving them wrong. It's in realizing their opinion stopped mattering while you were busy creating something that does. Have you ever been underestimated by people who should have believed in you? How did you respond? Share your story in the comments. And remember, the best revenge isn't just success. It's becoming someone who no longer needs the approval they once denied you. The morning after that first Sunday dinner with the Wilsons, I sat in our Cambridge apartment, staring at my laptop screen but not really seeing it. The words, Victoria, had spoken kept replaying in my mind. These girls from nowhere can be so persuasive. I'd spent my entire life working to build something meaningful, and she'd reduced me to a gold digger with a single phrase. Our apartment was modest but comfortable. James had insisted we find our own place rather than accept Victoria's offer of the Wilson family's Beacon Hill property. "We need to build our own life," he'd said, and I'd loved him even more for it. Now, surrounded by our mismatched furniture and the potted plants I couldn't seem to keep alive, I opened a new document and began to type. It wasn't a business plan, not yet. Just ideas, fragments of a vision that had been forming since my research days at Mass General. I'd seen firsthand how clinical trials struggled to find eligible patients, how patients desperate for cutting-edge, Treatments couldn't navigate the labyrinthine systems designed to allegedly help them. There had to be a better way to connect the right patients with the right trials, to streamline the process while maintaining ethical standards and data integrity. By noon, I had 12 pages of notes. By dinner, a rough framework for a digital platform that could transform clinical trial recruitment. When James came home that evening, his tie loosened and jacket slung over his shoulder, I was still typing. "Have you moved at all today?" he asked, kissing the top of my head. I looked up, blinking as if waking from a dream. I think I might have figured it out. Figured what out? What I'm supposed to do next. Over takeout Thai food, I explained. My idea. James listened intently, asking smart questions about regulatory hurdles and privacy concerns. Not once did he suggest it was too ambitious, or that I should stick with my safe research position. "You know this won't be easy," he said finally, setting down his chopsticks. "Starting a company from scratch never is." "I know. And my family." "Ah," he hesitated. "They won't understand. They'll think it's frivolous, especially Mother." I pushed my noodles around. "Do you care what they think?" He considered this, his lawyer's mind weighing the question as seriously as any legal brief. "I care what you think. I care about your dreams." He reached across the table for my hand. The Wilsons have always had one very narrow definition of success. Maybe it's time for a new one. The following week, I gave notice at the hospital. My supervisor seemed genuinely baffled. "You're leaving research for a startup? With no funding? No team?" Dr. Abrams had been a mentor of sorts, but even he couldn't hide his skepticism. "Emma, you have a promising career here. Stability. Benefits." I thought about stability. About the Wilson family dinners stretching endlessly into the future, each one reinforcing my place in their hierarchy. About spending decades trying to earn the approval of people who had decided my worth before ever knowing me. "I need to try this," I said simply. "I believe it matters." Dr. Abrams sighed but wrote down a name on a slip of paper. Michael Taylor, angel investor with a background in medical technology. "Tell him I sent you. He likes big ideas and underdogs." He slid the paper across his desk. "Don't make me regret this referral." I spent the next month refining my business plan, researching competitors, and preparing a pitch deck that wouldn't make me look completely naive. Our savings dwindled as I no longer contributed to our joint account. James never complained, but I saw how he checked our balance more frequently, how he started packing lunches instead of buying them near his office. When the day came for my meeting with Michael Taylor, I was a nervous wreck. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, professional, but not pretentious, confident but not flashy. Nothing I owned had the designer labels Victoria casually flaunted, but I'd invested in a good blazer that fit properly. Michael's office was in a converted warehouse in South Boston, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and a casual demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "So you're Abrams's protege," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "He says you're brilliant, but possibly delusional." I laughed despite myself. "That sounds like him." "Show me this possibly delusional idea of yours." I'd rehearsed my pitch dozens of times, but still fumbled through the first few slides. Michael didn't interrupt or check his phone, just watched with an inscrutable expression. By the time I reached the market analysis, I'd found my rhythm. The average clinical trial delays cost pharmaceutical companies $600,000 to $8 million per day, I explained, and nearly 80% of trials fail to recruit sufficient patients on time. Meanwhile, eligible patients struggle to find trials that could literally save their lives. I pulled up a slide showing the disconnect between trial databases and patient resources. This isn't just inefficient, it's tragic. Lives are at stake. Treatments that could help people aren't reaching them because of outdated systems and information. Silos. Michael leaned forward slightly. And your solution? I outlined the platform, a patient-centered interface that would match individuals with trials based on sophisticated algorithms, geographic proximity, and detailed medical criteria. On the research side, trial coordinators would have streamlined recruitment tools, real-time analytics, and compliance safeguards. The technology to do this exists, I concluded. It just hasn't been properly integrated and humanized. That's what Horizon Health Tech will do. When I finished, Michael was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Why you, Emma? There are plenty of technologists working in healthcare. What makes you the one to solve this particular problem? I could have listed my credentials, my research experience, my publications, my academic background. Instead, I told him about Mrs. Patel. She was a patient at Mass General, stage 3 ovarian cancer. Standard treatments weren't working, and her oncologist mentioned a trial happening at Dana-Farber. But by the time she navigated the referral process, completed the screening paperwork, and was evaluated, the trial had filled its quota. 6 weeks later, she was too sick to qualify for the next opening. I swallowed hard. She died 3 months after that. The preliminary results from that trial showed a 47% response rate in patients with her exact profile. I met Michael's gaze directly. That shouldn't happen, not when we have the technology to prevent it, and I won't stop until we fix it. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Michael nodded once, decisively. I think you might be just the right kind of delusional, Emma Chen. He reached for his tablet. Let's talk numbers. That evening, I came home to find James cooking dinner, a bottle of wine already, open on the counter. He looked up expectantly when I walked in. Well? I couldn't contain my smile. He's in $250,000 in seed funding. James whooped, grabbing me in a hug that lifted me off the floor. I knew he'd see what I see in you. Later, as we celebrated with pasta and wine that was definitely not up to Wilson standards, James grew thoughtful. We should probably tell my parents about this at some point. My stomach clenched. Do we have to? They'll find out eventually. Better it comes from us than Boston's gossip circuit. He twirled pasta on his fork. Sunday dinner? I nodded reluctantly. Like ripping off a Band-Aid, quick and painful. The reaction was everything I'd expected and dreaded. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows lifted so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. A startup? With no experience? In this economy? Each question dripped with incredulity. Richard at least attempted diplomacy. It's certainly ambitious, though perhaps a bit risky given James's career trajectory. Appearances matter in his field. Olivia, James's sister, didn't even try to hide her disdain. So you're, building an app? Like those college dropouts in hoodies? She gestured vaguely with her wine glass. How quaint. James tensed beside me. Emma's building a platform that could transform healthcare access. It's not an app for ordering takeout. Victoria sighed dramatically. James, darling, we're simply concerned. New marriages have enough challenges without adding financial instability. Emma's research position was at least respectable. I haven't left medicine, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm trying to improve it. Of course you are, dear. Victoria's smile was glacial. And we wish you all the luck in the world. Just don't expect James to support you indefinitely if this little venture doesn't pan out. The drive home was silent. I stared out the window at the rain-slicked streets, fighting the familiar feeling of inadequacy that always lingered after. Wilson family gatherings. I'm sorry, James said finally. For what? You defended me. For not walking out. For sitting there while they belittled something important to you. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Sometimes I don't recognize them. Or maybe I'm just finally seeing clearly. I placed my hand on his arm. They're your family. James, that's complicated. You're my family now. His voice was firm. And I won't let them make you feel less than ever again. But promises, I was learning, were easier made than kept. The reality of startup life quickly consumed every waking moment. I found a desk at a co-working space filled with 20-something engineers building social media platforms and gaming apps. Most days, I was the only woman and definitely the only one working in healthcare. The seed money that had seemed so substantial disappeared alarmingly fast between development costs, legal fees for regulatory compliance, and basic operating expenses. 6 months in, I was working 18-hour days, subsisting on coffee and protein bars, and coming home to an increasingly empty apartment as James's junior partner responsibilities kept him at the office later and later. We were like ships passing in the night, exchanging quick kisses and abbreviated updates. Then came the first major setback. The developer I'd hired to build the initial prototype quit without warning, taking half my code with him and claiming it was his intellectual property. The legal battle ate through precious resources and time I couldn't afford to lose. That night, I broke down. James found me sitting on our bathroom floor at 2 a.m., silently crying. Em? What happened? He knelt beside me, still in his suit from work. I can't do this. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Maybe your mother was right. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this world. James sat beside me on the cold tile, loosening his tie. Tell me what happened. I explained about the developer, the lost code, the dwindling funds. I'm going to fail, and everyone's going to know it, and Victoria will have been right all along. Is that what this is about? Proving my mother wrong? The question caught me off guard. No, yes, I don't know. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I believed in this idea. I still do. But maybe I'm not the right person to bring it to life. James was quiet for a long moment. When I first made junior partner, I lost a big case, completely tanked it. I was sure they'd rescind the promotion, that I'd embarrassed the whole firm. I looked at him, surprised. He'd never mentioned this. My supervisor called me into his office, and I was ready for the axe to fall. Instead, he said something I'll never forget. Now you know what it feels like. The question is, what are you going to do about it? James took my hand. So that's what I'm asking you. What are you going to do about it, Emma? I thought about Mrs. Patel, about all the patients waiting for trials that could save them, about the platform that still existed in my mind, even if the prototype was gone. Start over, I said finally, but smarter this time. The next day, I reached out to an old classmate from BU who'd gone into software development. Sophia was brilliant, ethical, and looking for meaningful work after years of building ad targeting algorithms that left her feeling hollow. I can't pay you much, I admitted over coffee. Barely anything, actually. Sophia studied the wireframes I'd brought. But you'll give me equity? Yes, and the chance to build something that matters. She looked up, a spark of interest in her eyes. Tell me more about patient matching algorithms. Sophia became Horizon's first real employee. We worked out of coffee shops to save on co-working fees, taking turns buying refills to justify occupying a table for hours. She rebuilt the prototype from my notes and designs, adding improvements I hadn't even considered. For the first time, in months, progress felt tangible. We needed to test the platform with real data, which meant convincing at least one hospital to take a chance on us. I leveraged every connection from my Mass General days, sending emails, making calls, practically begging for meetings. Dr. Abrams came through again, arranging a meeting with the clinical research coordinator at Beth Israel. She's willing to give you 15 minutes, he warned. Don't waste them. Dr. Lin was formidable, efficient, skeptical, and clearly impatient with what she probably saw as yet another tech solution, peddled by people who didn't understand clinical realities. I'd prepared a condensed demo, but Sophia's laptop crashed right as we began. While she desperately tried to reboot, I made a split-second decision. I put away my notes and spoke from the heart. Dr. Lin, I know you have procedures to approve, IRB submissions to review, and a dozen other priorities more important than listening to another pitch. But here's the truth. Your clinical trial enrollment is 23% below target for your immunotherapy studies. Her eyebrows rose slightly. I'd done my homework. Every day of delay costs your department and the patients who could benefit from these treatments. Our platform can help you reach enrollment targets faster, with better qualified candidates, while reducing administrative burden on your team. I gestured to Sophia, who had finally gotten the laptop working. We can show you how. Or you can tell us what specific problems you need solved, and we'll show you how we'd approach them. Dr. Lin studied me for a moment, then checked her watch. You have 30 minutes, not 15. Make them count. By the end of the meeting, we had a commitment for a small pilot program, just one oncology trial, with careful oversight and extensive reporting requirements. It wasn't much, but it was a real-world test case. That night, I texted James the news. He was working late again, a pattern that had become our new normal. His reply came an hour later. That's amazing, Em. Celebrate this weekend? We didn't end up celebrating. James got pulled into an emergency case, and I spent the weekend refining the platform for the pilot. Monday bled into Tuesday, then into weeks of intense preparation. The distance between us grew, not from lack of love, but from lives that seemed to be accelerating in parallel rather than together. The pilot launched on a rainy Tuesday in October. For 6 weeks, one small corner of Beth Israel's oncology department used our platform to match patients with a Phase 2 trial for a promising new combination therapy. Every night, I checked our metrics obsessively: enrollment rates, screening efficiency, patient satisfaction scores. The results exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Patient enrollment increased by 34%. Administrative time decreased by 41%. Most importantly, patients reported feeling more informed and engaged in the process. Dr. Lin's email was characteristically concise. Results compelling. Ready to discuss expanded implementation. Bringing colleagues from cardiology and neurology to next meeting. I forwarded the email to Michael, adding simply, "It works." His reply came minutes later. Time to scale. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Suddenly, everything accelerated. Michael introduced me to his venture capital connections. I refined my pitch, now backed by actual data and a referenceable client. Sophia and I worked through the night preparing for the biggest meeting of Horizon's young life. The morning of the pitch, I laid out 3 potential outfits on our bed. None seemed right. Too formal, too casual. Too much like I was trying to be someone I wasn't. I was still deliberating when James emerged from the shower. "Wear the blue," he said immediately. "It's confident without being flashy. It's you." I smiled gratefully. "When did you become a fashion expert?" "I've been paying attention." He kissed my forehead. "More than you know." He was right. The blue suit projected exactly the image I wanted. Professional, trustworthy, innovative without being reckless. As I fastened my grandmother's simple pearl earrings, I caught James watching me in the mirror. "What?" I asked. "I'm just—" He seemed to search for the right words. "I'm proud of you, Emma. Whatever happens today." 5 hours later, I sat in the lobby of the venture capital firm, waiting for their decision. The pitch had gone well. I'd presented confidently, answered their questions directly, and demonstrated the platform's potential with real data. Now came the hardest part: waiting. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Sunday dinner reminder, 6 p.m. sharp. Bringing James's cousin Margaret. Her husband just made partner at Goldman. I closed my eyes briefly. The implied comparison wasn't subtle. Margaret's husband was succeeding in an approved Wilson way, while James was married to a woman chasing a pipe dream. Before I could decide how to respond, Michael emerged from the conference room, his expression giving nothing away. Well? I stood, my heart pounding. A slow smile spread across his face. They're in, 2.8 million, Series A. My knees nearly buckled. 2.8 million? You convinced them, Emma. The platform, the pilot results, your vision, it all aligned. He handed me a term sheet. There's work to do on this, legal details to iron out, but the money's real. I scanned the document, my hands shaking slightly. This changes everything. It does, Michael agreed. Starting with you'll need actual office space, a real team, marketing budget. He checked his watch. And I'm guessing you have some calls to make. The first call was to James, who whooped so loudly when I told him that his assistant came running. The second was to Sophia, who burst into tears. The third was to Dr. Lin, who responded with characteristic restraint. Congratulations. Don't let the money make you sloppy. I didn't call Victoria. Instead, I texted James. Coming to Sunday dinner after all, have some news to share. Sunday arrived, and I dressed with unusual care, nothing ostentatious, but a simple dress, from a designer Victoria might recognize, paired with my grandmother's pearls. James watched with amusement as I fussed more than usual with my hair. Having second thoughts about dinner? He asked. No, I replied, securing a loose strand. Just want to look the part. What part is that? I met his eyes in the mirror. CEO of a venture-backed healthcare technology company. His smile was slow and appreciative. You already do. The Wilson estate was as imposing as ever, a stately, colonial in Beacon Hill with a perfectly manicured lawn and discreet security system. Victoria opened the door herself, coiffed and composed as always. James, darling. She air-kissed his cheeks. And Emma, so glad you could join us. Herba. Tone suggested the opposite. Margaret and Christopher are already here. Margaret turned out to be a willowy blonde with the effortless polish of old money, while Christopher looked every inch the successful financier, tailored suit, expensive watch, confident handshake. They were the epitome of a Wilson-approved couple. Emma's a researcher at Mass General, Victoria explained as we sat for drinks in the formal living room. Actually, I corrected gently, I left MGH last year. I founded a healthcare technology company called Horizon Health Tech. Christopher's interest seemed piqued. Tech startup? Interesting space right now. Victoria waved a dismissive hand. It's all very new. A work in progress, really. I took a sip of my drink, savoring the moment. We just closed our Series A funding round, $2.8 million. The room went silent. Victoria's smile froze. Richard's eyebrows rose, slightly. Margaret and Christopher exchanged surprised glances. 2.8 million? Christopher repeated. That's substantial for an early round. The platform showed exceptional results in our pilot program, I explained, keeping my voice casual. We're expanding to multiple hospital systems. Next quarter. Victoria recovered quickly. How lovely for you to have this project. Of course, James's work at the firm is going exceptionally well, too. He's on track for senior partner, aren't you, darling? James slipped his hand into mine. Emma's company is going to transform patient access to clinical trials. The funding is just the beginning. Richard cleared his throat. Well, this is certainly unexpected news. He raised his glass slightly. Congratulations, Emma. It wasn't exactly warm enthusiasm, but coming from Richard Wilson, it was practically a standing ovation. Victoria's lips thinned almost imperceptibly. "Thank you," I said, meeting his eyes. "It's been an incredible journey so far." Dinner proceeded with an undercurrent of tension. Victoria steered the conversation toward safe, familiar territory. Christopher's recent promotion, upcoming charity galas, the right schools for Margaret's children. But something had shifted. When I spoke, Christopher and even Richard listened with a new attentiveness. Only Victoria seemed determined to maintain the old dynamic. As we prepared to leave, Victoria pulled me aside in the foyer. "Emma, dear, a word of caution. These startup ventures can be so volatile. I'd hate to see you and James make lifestyle changes based on temporary success. I recognized the tactic, the veneer of concern masking an attempt to minimize my achievement. Year ago, it might have worked. Now, I simply smiled. Thank you for your concern, Victoria. But Horizon is built on solving real problems for real patients. That's a foundation that doesn't disappear with market fluctuations." She blinked, perhaps unused to such direct pushback. "Well, we'll see, won't we?" In the car heading home, James was uncharacteristically quiet. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "I'm thinking my mother doesn't know what to do with you anymore." He glanced over, a smile playing at his lips. "And I'm wondering if you realize how extraordinary that is." No one leaves Victoria Wilson speechless. I laughed, the tension of the evening finally breaking. "I didn't do it to prove her wrong, you know. That was just a satisfying side effect." "I know." He reached for my hand. "You did it because you saw a problem no one was solving properly. That's who you are." His voice softened. "That's who I married." Back at our apartment, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the couch. Well, that was exhausting. James loosened his tie. But worth it to see Mother trying to process the fact that her daughter-in-law just raised nearly $3 million. I smiled, but a shadow crossed my thoughts. The money doesn't change who I am, though. To her, I'll always be the girl from Lakeville who wasn't born into the right circles. Maybe, James acknowledged, but it might change how she acts toward you. And right now, I'll take that as a win. He was right. The funding didn't automatically transform me into someone Victoria Wilson would respect, but it had shifted something fundamental in our dynamic. For the first time since meeting the Wilsons, I felt like I was standing on solid ground of my own making. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I realized something important. I'd spent so long feeling judged by Victoria's standards that I'd almost forgotten to create my own. Horizon wasn't my attempt to prove my worth to the Wilsons. It was my chance to define success on my own terms. And that, more than any funding amount, felt like the real breakthrough. The morning after Horizon secured the Series A funding, I woke before sunrise. For a moment, I lay still in the semi-darkness, listening to James's steady breathing beside me. My mind was already racing with plans, priorities, urgent next steps. The two $8 million that had seemed astronomical yesterday now felt like both. A validation and a weight. Proof that others believed in our vision, but also a clock ticking down on our runway to demonstrate results. I slipped out of bed quietly and made coffee, opening my laptop at the kitchen counter. By the time James emerged from the bedroom, rumpled and yawning, I'd already drafted job descriptions, listed potential office spaces to tour, and created a 6-month milestone chart. He blinked at my spreadsheets. "Have you slept at all?" "I slept," I assured him, pushing a mug of coffee his way. "But there's so much to do. We need to hire developers, a project manager, someone to handle regulatory compliance." I gestured at my laptop screen. "And we need to find real office space. The co-working setup won't cut it anymore." James smiled, cupping his coffee mug. "You know what I just realized? I've never seen you like this before." "Sleep-deprived and manic?" "No." His expression softened. In your element. Completely. Unapologetically in your element. I paused, considering his words. He was right. Despite the enormous challenges ahead, I felt a certainty I'd never experienced before. Not in my research work, certainly not in navigating Wilson family dynamics. This was what I was meant to do. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. We leased a modest office space in Cambridge, close enough to the hospital systems we were targeting, but far enough from Beacon Hill to feel like neutral territory. I hired carefully, a senior developer who'd built healthcare systems before, a project manager with clinical trial experience, a UX designer who specialized in patient-facing interfaces. Sophia became our CTO, her quiet brilliance finally receiving proper recognition and compensation. Each new hire felt like adding a piece to a puzzle I'd been assembling in my mind for years. The Horizon team grew to 8 people, then 12. We developed rigorous security protocols, refined the patient matching algorithms, and built reporting features that gave researchers unprecedented visibility into recruitment patterns. Our pilot with Beth Israel expanded to 3 additional trials. Boston Medical Center signed on next, followed by Tufts Medical Center. Each new implementation taught us something valuable, revealed an unforeseen challenge, pushed us to improve. I was working harder than I ever had. 16-hour days, weekends, middle-of-the-night emails when inspiration struck. But unlike the grinding exhaustion of the early days, this work energized me. I was building something real, something that mattered. James and I adjusted to our new rhythms. He remained committed to his law career, but found ways to support Horizon from the sidelines, reviewing contracts, connecting me with potential healthcare clients, acting as a sounding board when I needed to work through complex problems. We saw the Wilson family less frequently. Sunday dinners became monthly occurrences rather than weekly obligations. The dynamics had shifted subtly but meaningfully since the funding announcement. Victoria still maintained her cool aloofness, but her dismissive comments about my little project had ceased. Richard occasionally asked surprisingly informed questions about Horizon's progress. Even Olivia seemed to view me with a new, if grudging, curiosity. 6 months after the Series A, Horizon reached a critical milestone. Our platform had successfully helped enroll over 1,000 patients in various clinical trials across 5 hospital systems. The data showed a 37% improvement in recruitment timelines and a 42% increase in suitable matches between patients and trials. These weren't just abstract metrics. They represented real people gaining access to treatments that might save or improve their lives. To celebrate, I took the entire team to dinner at an upscale restaurant in Back Bay. As I looked around the table at the faces of the people who'd helped bring my vision to life, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I'd experienced before. This wasn't just my achievement. It belonged to all of us. Michael raised his glass. To Emma, who saw a problem others ignored and refused to accept that it couldn't be fixed. The team cheered, and I felt my cheeks flush. To all of you, I countered, raising my own glass, for believing in Horizon enough to join before we had fancy offices or stability or even proof that our crazy ideas would work. Later that evening, as James and I walked home along the Charles River, the autumn air crisp around us, he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Are you happy, Em?" I looked at him, surprised. Of course. Horizon is exceeding all our projections. The platform is working. We're making a real difference. That's not what I asked. His voice was gentle. I asked if you're happy. I slowed my pace, considering the question honestly. Yes, I said finally. I am. Not every minute. Some days are still terrifying, and I wake up convinced everything's about to fall apart. But underneath that, there's this certainty. This feeling that even if we failed tomorrow, trying to build this was the right choice. He nodded, seeming satisfied. That's what I wanted to know. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights of the city reflect on the dark water. Then James spoke again, his tone casual, but something in his expression alert. "Mother called today. Wants us to come to dinner next weekend. She was unusually insistent." My contentment dimmed slightly. Did she say why? Apparently, several of Dad's clients are exploring healthcare technology investments. She thought, it might be mutually beneficial for you to meet them. I stopped walking. Your mother is voluntarily introducing me to potential investors? James looked as perplexed as I felt. It appears so. What's the catch? He shrugged. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe Horizon's success is making her reconsider her position. I raised an eyebrow. Or maybe she's figured out a new angle to regain control. Possibly, he conceded. But either way, it's progress of a sort. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have acknowledged Horizon as a legitimate business, let alone facilitated professional connections. He was right. And despite my wariness, I was curious to see what Victoria Wilson considered important enough to arrange introductions she'd previously avoided at all costs. The following Saturday found us back at the Wilson estate. Victoria greeted us with her usual perfect smile, though I noticed something different in her manner, a slight deference that hadn't been there before. "Emma, James, thank you for coming. Richard's guests are so looking forward to meeting you." The living room held 4 middle-aged men in expensive suits, drinking Richard's rare scotch and discussing market fluctuations. I recognized one immediately. Lawrence. Haverford, managing partner at one of Boston's oldest private equity firms. Another was Sam Blackwell, whose healthcare investment portfolio was legendary in the industry. Victoria performed the introductions with surprising enthusiasm. Emma is pioneering a platform that's revolutionizing clinical trial recruitment. She's already implemented it at several major Boston hospitals with remarkable results. I managed to hide my shock at her accurate and positive description of Horizon. James caught my eye briefly, his expression echoing my disbelief. For the next hour, I found myself engaged in substantive conversations about healthcare technology, regulatory challenges, and scaling strategies. These weren't casual social discussions. They were the kind of serious exploratory talks that could lead to significant investment or partnership opportunities. During a momentary lull, Victoria appeared at my elbow with a fresh drink. "They seem quite impressed," she murmured. Lawrence rarely stays this long at these gatherings unless he sees real potential. I studied her, trying to discern her motivation. "Thank you for arranging this." She waved a dismissive hand, but her expression remained calculating. The Wilsons have always understood the importance of strategic connections. If your company continues its current trajectory, it could become an asset to our wider network. And there it was, the angle. In Victoria's world, my success was only valuable if it could be absorbed into the Wilson sphere of influence, reframed as part of their dynasty rather than my independent achievement. "Horizon is doing quite well with our current investors," I said carefully. "But I appreciate the introductions." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Though one can never have too many powerful allies in Boston, don't you agree?" Before I could respond, Lawrence Haverford approached us. "Mrs. Wilson, you've been hiding a remarkable talent in your family. Emma's platform addresses pain points the healthcare industry has struggled with for decades." He turned to me. "I'd like to continue this conversation in a more formal setting. My office, perhaps?" Victoria beamed with proprietary pride, though she'd personally cultivated my success. "Emma will certainly make time in her schedule, won't you, dear?" I smiled politely. "I'd be happy to meet Lawrence. My assistant can coordinate with yours next week." Later, in the kitchen where I'd gone to refill my water glass, James found me staring out the window at the perfectly manicured garden. "That was quite a performance from Mother," he observed, leaning against the counter. "She's trying to co-opt Horizon. I said quietly. Make it seem like part of the Wilson family enterprises. James nodded. That's her playbook. If she can't dismiss something, she absorbs it. I won't let that happen. My voice was firm. Horizon's success belongs to our team, our vision, not the Wilson name. I know. He touched my arm gently. But be careful. Mother doesn't handle rejection well, especially not now that she's decided you might be useful after all. His warning proved prescient. Over the next few weeks, Victoria called repeatedly with opportunities for Horizon, introductions to her friends on hospital boards, suggestions for society events where I could network with potential investors, even offers to feature Horizon in charity galas she chaired. Each outreach came with invisible strings, subtle expectations that I would acknowledge the Wilson family's role in opening these doors. I navigated carefully, accepting introductions that made strategic sense while firmly maintaining Horizon's independence. The tension came to a head at a healthcare innovation luncheon where both Victoria and I had been invited as guests. I was there representing Horizon, while Victoria attended in her capacity as chair of a hospital foundation board. During the pre-lunch mingling, I found myself surrounded by a group of interested hospital administrators asking detailed questions about our platform. Victoria glided into the conversation with practiced ease. Emma's work is quite promising. We're so pleased she's continuing the Wilson tradition of innovation in healthcare. The administrators looked confused. One turned to me. I wasn't aware Horizon was affiliated with Wilson Financial Group. Before I could respond, Victoria continued smoothly. Not formally affiliated, of course, but Emma is family, and we've been providing guidance since the beginning. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but kept my expression neutral. Horizon is an independent entity, I clarified, though I'm fortunate to have married into a family that values innovation. Victoria's smile never faltered, but I saw the flash of irritation in her eyes. The rest of the luncheon proceeded with polite tension between us. Afterward, as we collected our coats, she spoke in a low voice. There's no need to be quite so explicit about separation, Emma. Being associated with the Wilson name opens doors. I met her gaze directly. My company is opening its own doors, Victoria. The success we're having is based on the platform we've built and the problems we're solving, not family connections. Don't be naive. Her tone remained pleasant, but her eyes hardened. In Boston, who you know matters as much as what you build. The Wilson name has weight, influence. You'd be foolish not to use it. I appreciate your perspective, I said carefully, but Horizon will succeed or fail on its own merits. That's important to me. She studied me for a moment. You've become quite confident since securing your funding. I hope that confidence is warranted. The encounter left me unsettled. Victoria's attempt to claim credit for Horizon's success was manipulative, but unsurprising. What bothered me more was the realization that, in her mind, my achievements would never truly be my own. They would always be filtered through my connection to James, to the Wilson legacy. That evening, I shared the interaction with James. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. She's never going to change, is she? I don't think so, I admitted. But it doesn't matter. I'm not building Horizon for her approval. No. He smiled, a hint of pride in his expression. You're building it because you saw a problem no one else was solving. That's what she'll never understand. Her world revolves around appearances and connections. Yours revolves around seeing things clearly and fixing what's broken. His words stayed with me as Horizon continued its rapid growth. 9 months after our Series A funding, we expanded to 15 hospital systems across New England. Our team grew to 25 employees. We moved to larger offices in the Seaport District, with views of the harbor and room to expand. Michael began suggesting it was time to consider a Series B round, a larger investment that would allow us to scale nationally. The prospect was both exhilarating and daunting. Raising at a higher valuation would mean increased scrutiny, higher expectations, and an even more intense spotlight. We should be targeting at least $20 million, Michael advised during a strategy session. Maybe more, given your traction and the market demand. I stared at him. $20 million? That's exactly what Horizon needs to go from regional success to national player, he finished. The platform works, Emma. The results speak for themselves. Now it's time to think bigger. Thinking bigger meant preparing for a whole new level of investor presentations. It meant financial projections and growth strategies that extended years into the future. It meant positioning Horizon not just as a promising startup, but as a company with the potential to transform an entire industry. As I immersed myself in Series B preparations, an unexpected call came from Olivia Wilson. James's sister and I had maintained a polite but distant relationship since the wedding. She'd always followed Victoria's lead in treating me as an unfortunate addition to the Wilson family. "Emma," she said when I answered, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," I replied, curious about the purpose of her call. "What can I do for you?" I need your advice." She sounded uncomfortable with the admission. "Bradley and I are thinking of starting a family foundation focused on children's health initiatives. Given your experience in the healthcare space and with building something from scratch, I thought you might have insights." I was momentarily speechless. Olivia Wilson was asking for my professional advice. The shift was so unexpected, I wondered briefly if it was some sort of trap. "I'd be happy to share what I've learned," I said cautiously, though my experience is specifically in clinical trial technology, not foundation work. "That's fine. It's more about—" She hesitated. "How you knew you could do it. Build something significant, I mean. Everyone thought you were just— well, you know what they thought." I did know. They'd thought I was a naive dreamer at best, a gold digger capitalizing on the Wilson name at worst. I knew I could do it because I'd identified a real problem that needed solving, I said honestly, and because I wasn't afraid of being wrong or failing publicly. The mission mattered more than my pride. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "That's not how I was raised to think," Olivia finally said. "Failure isn't really an option in the Wilson world." "Which is probably why innovation is difficult," I observed, then immediately wondered if I'd gone too far. To my surprise, Olivia laughed, a genuine sound I'd rarely heard from her. "You might have a point. Could we meet for coffee? I have more questions if you're willing." That coffee meeting marked a subtle but significant shift in my relationship with the Wilson family. Olivia and I were never going to be close friends, but a tentative mutual respect began developing between us. She asked thoughtful questions about building an organization from the ground up, and I found myself impressed by her genuine desire to create something meaningful rather than just another vanity project. Meanwhile, Horizon's momentum continued to build. Our platform not only streamlined patient recruitment, but was beginning to generate valuable data about trial participation patterns, insights that could help researchers design more inclusive and effective studies in the future. Word traveled quickly in the healthcare technology world. Potential investors began approaching us, rather than the other way around. Industry publications featured Horizon in articles about innovations in clinical research. I was invited to speak at healthcare conferences alongside established industry leaders. One particular invitation caught me off guard: a request to give the keynote address at the annual Healthcare Innovation Summit, a prestigious event sponsored by none other than Wilson Financial Group. The email came from Richard's executive. Assistant, formal, and polite, as if it were a routine business communication rather than a loaded family matter. I stared at the invitation for a long time before forwarding it to James with a simple question mark. His response came minutes later. "This is interesting. Want to talk about it tonight?" That evening, James arrived home with takeout from our favorite Thai place, and a bottle of wine. So, he said as he unpacked containers of pad Thai and green curry, the summit invitation. What are you thinking? I poured us each a glass of wine. I'm thinking it's complicated. Professionally, it makes sense. It's a high-profile event with the right audience for Horizon. But it's sponsored by my family's company. And there's no such thing as a simple professional arrangement when the Wilsons are involved, James finished. Exactly. I took a sip of wine. Is this your father's idea? Your mother's? What's the angle? James considered this. My guess is it's actually my father's doing. Mother would never suggest it unless she could control the narrative completely. Dad, on the other hand, is ultimately a pragmatist. Horizon is gaining significant attention. Having you speak at their event associates Wilson Financial with healthcare. Innovation without requiring any actual change on their part. I twirled noodles around my fork, thinking, so it's basically a PR move. Almost certainly, James agreed. The question is whether it's beneficial for Horizon as well, or just for them. It was a fair question. The summit would put me in front of healthcare executives, hospital administrators, and potential investors. It would position Horizon as a leader in the field. But it would also inevitably tie us to the Wilson name in ways I'd been carefully avoiding. What would you do? I asked James. He considered for a moment. I'd accept the invitation, but on my own terms. Make it clear that you're speaking as Horizon's CEO, not as a Wilson family member. Negotiate control over your presentation content. And he smiled slightly. I'd use the opportunity to announce something significant, something that makes it clear Horizon is standing on its own, not riding on anyone's coattails. The more I thought about it, the more James's approach made sense. The summit was scheduled for 3 months away, right around the time we expected to close our series. B funding. What better platform to announce Horizon's next phase of growth? I replied to the invitation the next day, accepting the keynote slot, but with specific conditions about how Horizon would be presented. Richard's assistant responded promptly, agreeing to my terms with minimal pushback. With the summit on the horizon, I threw myself into preparations for both the keynote and the Series B fundraising. The two efforts became intertwined in my mind. The funding would make the announcement meaningful, and the high-profile announcement would validate the investment. Michael arranged meetings with top-tier venture capital firms, private equity groups, and strategic industry investors. The interest exceeded even our optimistic projections. Our data was compelling. Our growth trajectory was impressive. And the problem we were solving resonated with investors who understood the healthcare space. 2 months before the summit, we received our first term sheet, $18 million at a $60 million valuation. A week later, a competing offer came in at $22 million. By the time we entered final negotiations, Horizon was positioned to close a $24 million Series B round that would value the company at over $70 million. The night we received the final paperwork, I sat alone in our seaport loft, staring out at the harbor lights. From a seed of an idea to a $70 million company in less than 3 years. From Victoria Wilson's dismissive comments at our wedding to being the keynote speaker at her husband's flagship industry event. The journey felt surreal. My phone buzzed with a text from James, who was working late to finish a case before joining. Me at home. You did this. All of it. Don't ever forget that. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. There would be more challenges ahead, more growth, more scrutiny. The road from $70 million to the next milestone would be even more demanding. But in that moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what we'd accomplished. Horizon wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And in just a few weeks, at the Wilson Financial Group's own summit, I would stand before the entire Boston healthcare community and announce that the company Victoria had once dismissed as my Little Project was now worth more than many of the respectable businesses in her social circle. I wondered what her face would look like when the valuation was announced publicly. But more importantly, I wondered how many more patients would find clinical trials that could help them because of the platform we'd built. In the end, that was the only metric that truly mattered. The week before the Healthcare Innovation Summit, I found myself standing in Sophia's office, reviewing presentation slides for what felt like the 100th time. The large windows of our Seaport office framed the Boston harbor behind her, gray-blue water choppy under an overcast sky. "We need to simplify this section," Sophia said, pointing to a particularly dense slide showing our patient matching algorithm. "The technical details are impressive, but they'll lose half the audience." I sighed, leaning against her desk. "You're right. The point isn't to show how clever our engineering is. It's to demonstrate the impact." "Exactly." She switched to the next slide. "This is better. Real results, clean visualization, clear takeaway." The slide showed our outcomes across 27 hospital systems: 41% reduction in trial recruitment time, 58% increase in patient trial matches, 63% improvement in diversity of trial participants. Numbers that represented real people gaining access to treatments that might save their lives. We should lead with the patient stories, I decided. The data matters, but the human impact is what everyone will remember. The human impact had been on my mind constantly as we prepared for both the summit and the Series B announcement. Horizon had grown beyond my initial vision into something with potential to transform how patients accessed clinical trials nationwide. The $24 million investment would allow us to scale our platform to hundreds of hospitals, expand our team significantly, and develop new features to address additional pain points in the clinical research process. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Dinner with O&B still on for tonight?" Olivia and her husband Bradley had suggested a double date, a development that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. Since our coffee meeting, Olivia had gradually become, if not warm, at least genuinely respectful. She'd even defended me at a family gathering when Victoria had made a backhanded comment about internet companies. I texted back a quick confirmation and returned to the presentation prep. By late afternoon, Sophia and I had finalized the slides, striking the right balance between technical credibility and accessible impact. As I gathered my things to leave, Michael appeared in the doorway. "How's our keynote coming along?" he asked, casual but alert. Michael had transitioned from angel investor to formal advisor, his experience invaluable as we navigated rapid growth. "Ready," I assured him, "though I keep wanting to tinker with it." He smiled knowingly. "Always tempting, but sometimes done is better than perfect." "I know." I shouldered my bag. "Any last-minute advice?" Michael considered for a moment. "Remember why you started Horizon. Not to prove anything to anyone, but because you saw a problem worth solving. Lead with that authenticity, and the rest will follow." His words stayed with me as I left the office, surprisingly resonant for what might have seemed like standard motivational advice. When I'd started Horizon, Victoria's dismissal had been fresh, her words at our wedding still stinging. Proving her wrong had certainly been part of my drive. But the deeper motivation, the reason I'd kept going through the hardest moments, had always been about the patients, about fixing a broken system that cost lives. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes early and found James already waiting. At the bar, his suit slightly rumpled after a long day of depositions. He handed me a glass of wine as I slid onto the stool beside him. "How was your day, CEO?" he asked, kissing my cheek. "Productive. Yours, counselor?" "Endless." He loosened his tie. "But I'm officially free for the next 48 hours. I told the firm I'm taking personal days to support my wife's keynote." I raised an eyebrow. "And they were okay with that?" "More than okay," he said with a slight smirk. "Apparently, being married to the CEO of a hot healthcare tech company Makes me more interesting to the partners. They asked if you'd consider presenting to some of their healthcare clients next quarter. I laughed at the irony. James had once worried that my startup efforts might hamper his career trajectory. Now Horizon's success was enhancing his standing at the firm. Before I could respond, I spotted Olivia and Bradley entering the restaurant. Dinner proceeded with surprising ease. Olivia asked thoughtful questions about Horizon's growth, while Bradley, a finance guy through and through, was curious about our funding structure and growth strategy. The conversation felt refreshingly normal, the kind of shop talk you'd expect between professional couples, not the careful navigation of Wilson family politics I'd grown accustomed to. The foundation planning is moving forward, Olivia mentioned. Over dessert. We've identified 3 children's hospitals interested in piloting our program. That's fantastic, I said, genuinely impressed. Have you figured out your measurement framework? How you'll track outcomes? She nodded, pulling out her phone. I've been working on metrics. Would you mind taking a look? She handed me her phone, open to a document with surprisingly sophisticated assessment criteria. As I read through her notes, I realized something had shifted fundamentally in my relationship with James's sister. There was a newfound respect between us, professional women building something meaningful in our respective spheres. This is solid, I told her, returning the phone. Very clear objectives, measurable outcomes. Thanks. She seemed pleased. With the validation. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About identifying real problems and not being afraid to fail visibly. It's not how I was raised. I caught James watching us with a mixture of surprise and satisfaction. This developing rapport between his wife and sister clearly meant something to him. Mother mentioned you're speaking at Dad's summit next week, Olivia said, changing the subject. That should be interesting. Her tone was neutral, but something in her expression suggested she understood all the layers of complexity involved in my keynoting a Wilson financial event. It's a good platform to announce our Series B funding, I said carefully. The timing worked out well. Bradley looked up from his coffee. I heard rumors about the valuation. Very impressive if what's circulating is accurate. I smiled non-committally. The final paperwork wasn't signed yet, and I wasn't about to share specifics, even with family. We're pleased with the investor interest. Will your parents be there, Emma? Olivia asked. The question caught me off guard. My parents rarely entered Wilson family conversations. They ran their small pharmacy in Lakeville, lived modestly, and had been largely ignored by Victoria since the wedding. Yes, I said, a surge of pride rising unexpectedly. They're driving in for the keynote. Olivia nodded. We should all have dinner afterward, to celebrate. Later that night, as James and I walked home along the harbor, I tried to process the evening. Your sister suggested a family dinner, with my parents, voluntarily. James laughed. The world has officially turned upside down. She's changed, I observed. Or at least, she's allowing herself to be different around me. I think she's realizing there are other ways to measure success besides mother's approval. James took my hand. You might have had something to do with that. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of final preparations. The Series B paperwork was completed, signatures exchanged, funding secured. Horizon Health Tech was officially valued at $72. $5 million, with $24 million in fresh capital to fuel our expansion. The press release was drafted, ready to go live immediately following my summit announcement. The evening before the conference, I sat in our loft going through my presentation one last time when my phone rang. Victoria Wilson's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated before answering. Emma, she said when I picked up, her voice composed as always. I trust you're prepared for tomorrow. Yes, I replied simply. Everything's ready. Excellent. She paused, and I could almost hear her considering her next words carefully. I wanted to let you know that we've arranged for Boston Business Journal to cover your keynote. I've also invited several of Richard's most important clients specifically to hear you speak. I wasn't sure how to respond. Was this Victoria's way of showing support? Or was she simply ensuring the Wilson Financial Group received maximum publicity from Horizon's moment? Thank you, I said cautiously. That's thoughtful. The Wilsons have always understood the importance of appropriate publicity, she replied, as if that explained everything. Richard and I are pleased to see Horizon gaining recognition. It reflects well on the family. There it was again, the attempt to absorb my success into the I. Wilson narrative. To reframe Horizon as a Wilson family achievement rather than my independent creation. Horizon's success reflects well on our team, I corrected gently. We've built something meaningful together. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Yes, well, the summit audience will be quite influential. I'm sure you'll make the most of the opportunity. After we hung up, I relayed the conversation to James, who was setting the table for dinner. Classic mother, he said, unsurprised. She's positioning herself to take credit for your success, while simultaneously reminding you that you're addressing her crowd. She did mention arranging press coverage, I pointed out. That's actually helpful. True. He handed me a glass of wine. Just be prepared for her to work the room tomorrow like Horizon was her idea all along. I laughed despite myself. At this point, I almost don't care. The funding is secured. The company is thriving. She can tell whatever story makes her happy, as long as we can keep doing our work. The morning of the summit dawned clear and bright. I dressed with particular care. A tailored blue suit that projected confidence without ostentation, paired with the simple gold necklace my parents had given me when I graduated from BU. Professional, polished, but distinctly my own style rather than Victoria Wilson approved. James and I arrived at the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel together. The grand ballroom had been transformed for the summit, with elegant blue lighting and the Wilson Financial Group logo prominently displayed alongside banners featuring the summit theme, Innovation Transforming Healthcare. What I didn't expect was to see the Horizon logo featured almost as prominently on the stage backdrop. James noticed my surprise. Looks like Father decided to capitalize on your company's cachet, he murmured as we checked in at the registration desk. Victoria found us moments later, immaculately dressed in a cream suit that probably cost more than my first car. Emma, James, there you are. She air-kissed our cheeks. Emma, the tech team needs you for a microphone check before the opening session. And several journalists have requested interviews afterward. I'll handle the interview requests, came a voice from behind us. Michael appeared, extending his hand to Victoria. Michael Taylor, advisor to Horizon. Emma needs to focus on her keynote right now. Victoria's smile remained fixed, but I could see she was recalibrating, assessing Michael's role and influence, recognizing a disruption to her careful management of the day. Of course, she said smoothly. I've arranged a private room for Emma to prepare, right this way. As we followed Victoria through the crowded reception area, I spotted my parents near the entrance, looking slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the setting. I waved, excusing myself to greet them. Mom, Dad. I hugged them both tightly. I'm so glad you're here. My mother squeezed my hand. We wouldn't miss it, sweetheart, though we might be a bit underdressed for this place. She glanced around, at the well-heeled crowd. You look perfect, I assured her. Come meet the team before things get too hectic. I introduced my parents to Michael and several other Horizon team members who had arrived early. Victoria watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. She'd met my parents exactly twice, at our wedding and at one excruciating dinner afterward, and had made little effort to know them. The summit's opening session began promptly at 9 a.m. Richard Wilson gave a brief welcome address, highlighting Wilson Financial Group's commitment to healthcare innovation, a relatively new focus area for a company traditionally concentrated on wealth management and commercial real estate investment. Today's healthcare landscape demands fresh thinking and bold solutions, Richard concluded, which is why we're particularly pleased to have Emma Chen, CEO of Horizon Health Tech, as our keynote speaker later this morning. I sat in the audience, between James and Michael, listening as the first panel discussed investment trends in healthcare technology. The conversation was insightful but conservative, established players talking about incremental improvements rather than transformative change. Your timing couldn't be better, Michael whispered. This crowd needs to hear about real innovation, not just theoretical discussions. At 11 a.m., it was time for my keynote. I made my way backstage, where the event coordinator fitted me with a microphone and gave last-minute instructions. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see the ballroom had filled completely. In the front row sat Richard and Victoria, alongside several people I recognized as major hospital system executives. My parents were seated a few rows back, my mother clutching her purse nervously. The moderator gave me a professional introduction, highlighting Horizon's rapid growth and impact on clinical trial recruitment. As I walked onto the stage, the applause was polite but reserved, a crowd of healthcare industry veterans waiting to be impressed by a relative newcomer. I began not with Horizon's metrics or our funding news, but with a story. 3 years ago, I met a woman named Eleanor Jenkins, I said, my voice steady. She had been diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Her oncologist told her about a promising clinical trial, but by the time she navigated the complex enrollment process, the trial had filled its quota. 6 weeks of paperwork and phone calls had cost her a potential lifeline. The room was completely silent now, the audience engaged. Eleanor passed away 4 months later. The preliminary results from that trial showed a 52% response rate in patients with her exact profile. I paused, letting that sink in. Eleanor's story isn't unique. Every day, patients miss out on potentially life-saving treatments not because those treatments don't exist, but because our systems for connecting patients with trials are fundamentally broken. From there, I walked the audience through the problems Horizon was solving. The fragmented information systems, the inefficient matching processes, the barriers that kept diverse patient populations from accessing cutting-edge treatments. This isn't just a technology problem, I emphasized. It's a human problem with a technological solution. I showcased our platform, demonstrating how it had already helped thousands of patients find and enroll in appropriate trials. I shared testimonials from researchers who had filled their recruitment quotas in record time, and from patients who had accessed treatments that changed their prognosis. Then I revealed our expansion plans, powered by the Series B funding we'd just secured. Today, I'm pleased to announce that Horizon Health Tech has closed a $24 million investment round, valuing our company at $72.5 million. A murmur rippled through the audience. This funding will allow us to scale our platform nationally, reaching hundreds of hospital systems and potentially helping millions of patients connect with life-changing clinical trials. I glanced at the front row. Richard nodded slightly, seemingly impressed. Victoria's expression remained carefully neutral, though I thought I detected a flicker of surprise at the valuation figure. But this isn't just about growth for growth's sake, I continued. It's about fixing a broken system that costs lives every day. It's about creating technology that serves humanity rather than replacing it. I concluded with a call to action, challenging the healthcare establishments represented in the room to embrace innovation that truly improved patient outcomes, not just processes or profits. The applause that followed was no longer polite. It was enthusiastic, even passionate. As I stepped away from the podium, I saw my father wiping his eyes discreetly. My mother beamed with unmistakable pride. In the reception that followed, I was surrounded by hospital executives eager to discuss implementing our platform, investors interested in our growth trajectory, and journalists requesting interviews. Michael deftly managed the crowd, ensuring I had meaningful conversations, rather than just superficial networking. Victoria appeared at my elbow during a brief lull, champagne flute in hand. "Quite an impressive presentation," she said, her voice measured. "And the valuation. Well, it certainly garnered attention." "Thank you," I replied simply. "I've had several people ask me how the Wilsons identified such a promising healthcare investment so early," she continued, watching me closely. "Richard told them we recognized your potential from the beginning." I maintained a neutral expression, though internally I marveled at the revisionist history. How nice of him. "This summit has raised Wilson Financial's profile considerably," she added. "Your keynote is being live tweeted quite extensively." I understood then. Victoria wasn't congratulating me on Horizon's success. She was thanking me for enhancing the Wilson brand through association. "I'm glad the keynote resonated with the audience," I said diplomatically. "The summit is a perfect platform to discuss healthcare innovation." Before Victoria could respond, my parents approached, clearly hesitant to interrupt, but wanting to congratulate me. Victoria assessed them with a swift glance, taking in my father's sensible suit and my mother's department store dress. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," she acknowledged with perfect politeness. "How nice that you could attend." My mother, never intimidated, despite her modest background, smiled warmly. "We wouldn't have missed it. Emma has worked so hard for this moment." "Indeed," Victoria replied. "The Wilson networking connections have certainly accelerated her progress." I saw my father's expression tighten slightly. He knew exactly what Victoria was implying, that Horizon's success was due to Wilson influence rather than my own efforts. "Emma built this company through brilliance and persistence," he said quietly but firmly, "long before any connections came into play." Victoria's smile remained fixed, but something flickered in her eyes, surprise perhaps at being directly contradicted. "Well, family support is certainly important," she said vaguely, then excused herself to greet an arriving hospital board member. My father squeezed my shoulder. "Sorry if I spoke out of turn, but I couldn't let that stand." "You didn't say anything untrue," I assured him. "And thank you." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of conversations, connections, and congratulations. James circulated independently, but I often caught him watching me from across the room, a proud smile on his face. Olivia and Bradley made a point of introducing me to several of their friends in healthcare philanthropy. Even Richard engaged me in a surprisingly substantive discussion about Horizon's expansion strategy. As the event wound down, I found myself unexpectedly alone with Richard near the bar. He signaled the bartender for 2 sparkling waters. "The keynote exceeded expectations," he said, handing me a glass. "The valuation in particular has made quite an impression." "Thank you," I said, waiting for the qualifier I'd come to expect from Wilson compliments. But Richard surprised me. "I've been in financial services for 35 years, he continued. "I've seen many companies rise and fall. What you've built with Horizon, it has real substance, real potential for lasting impact." I studied him, unsure how to read this unexpected validation. "That means a lot, especially coming from you." He hesitated, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "The Wilson name opens certain doors in Boston, it's true. But what you do once those doors are open, that's entirely your own achievement." He glanced across the room to where Victoria was holding court with several society friends. "Not everyone in the family makes that distinction clearly enough." Before I could respond, he continued more briskly. "The Healthcare Innovation Summit will feature Horizon prominently in next year's program as well. I assume that would be acceptable?" I nodded, still processing his earlier comments. "Of course. We'd be happy to participate." "Good." He drained his water. "Now, I believe we're all gathering for dinner?" Victoria has reserved a private room at Sorellina. The dinner that followed was surreal in its normalcy. Victoria played the gracious hostess, seamlessly integrating my parents into conversation, as though they'd been part of the Wilson social circle for years. Olivia discussed her foundation plans with my mother, discovering they shared an interest in childhood literacy. James and Bradley debated the merits of different investment approaches, while my father listened attentively. I observed it all with a strange sense of detachment. This picture of family harmony was so at odds with the reality of the past 3 years. The dismissals, the subtle digs, the clear message that I didn't belong in the Wilson world. Yet here, we sat around a table at one of Boston's finest restaurants, celebrating Horizon's $72.5 million valuation, as though everyone had supported the journey from the beginning. The cognitive dissonance was almost dizzying. After the main course, Richard raised his glass in a toast. To Emma and Horizon Health Tech, an impressive achievement and a reflection of extraordinary dedication. Everyone raised their glasses. Victoria's smile was perfect, her eyes unreadable. To Emma, she echoed, who has certainly proven her capabilities. It wasn't quite an admission of error. It wasn't quite an apology for 3 years of dismissal and doubt. But from Victoria Wilson, it was perhaps as close as I would ever get. Later that night, as James and I walked along the harbor near our loft, I tried to make sense of the day. "Your father actually gave me a genuine compliment," I marveled, "and your mother managed an entire dinner without a single backhanded remark." James laughed. 72 million reasons to be nice. Is that all it was? The valuation? Considered this thoughtfully. Not entirely. The Wilsons respect success, yes, but they especially respect success that can't be denied or diminished. You've built something so undeniably significant that they have no choice but to acknowledge it. I stopped, looking out at the dark water, city lights reflecting off its surface. It shouldn't have taken this. Being valued at over $70 million shouldn't be the price of basic respect. No, James agreed, his voice soft. It shouldn't have been. I didn't build Horizon to prove anything to your family, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. I built it because I saw a problem worth solving. The validation that matters isn't from the Wilsons. It's from the patients who found trials that could save their lives. James wrapped his arm around my shoulders. That's why you succeeded where so many others fail. You weren't chasing approval or status. You were solving a real problem that needed solving. As we continued our walk home, I thought about Eleanor Jenkins, the patient whose story I'd shared in my keynote. I thought about all the other patients who had found clinical trials through our platform. I thought about the team we'd built, the culture of purpose and innovation we'd created together. Victoria Wilson had once whispered at my wedding that James could have married into real money instead of someone who needed to check price tags. The comment had stung deeply at the time, reinforcing all my insecurities about not belonging in the Wilson world. But walking beside James now, with Horizon flourishing and its impact growing daily, I realized how limited Victoria's definition of value had always been. True worth wasn't measured in old money or social connections. It was measured in purpose, in impact, in the courage to build something meaningful even when others doubted. And by that measure, I had been rich all along. 6 months after the Healthcare Innovation Summit, Horizon's growth continued to exceed even our most optimistic projections. Our platform had expanded to over 200 hospital systems nationwide. Our team had grown to 78 talented, passionate people dedicated to transforming clinical trial access. Most importantly, we'd helped connect more than 15,000 patients with potentially life-saving treatments they might never have found otherwise. The new Horizon headquarters occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek glass building in Boston's Seaport District. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the harbor, while open collaborative spaces encouraged the cross-functional teamwork that had become central to our culture. On this particular morning, I stood in my office, reviewing the final details for an event that felt both inevitable and surreal. The Wilson Financial Group's annual charity gala, which Horizon was officially sponsoring. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, Victoria Wilson had whispered in my ear at my own wedding reception that I wasn't good enough for her son, that James could have married into real money. Now her prized social event would carry my company's name, with Horizon contributing the largest single donation in the gala's history. "Everything set for tonight?" James asked, appearing in my doorway. He'd taken the day off to help with last-minute preparations. "Just finalizing the check presentation details," I replied, showing him the oversized ceremonial check that would be displayed during the gala. $1 million from Horizon Health Tech to support Wilson Foundation's healthcare initiatives. James whistled softly. "That's going to make quite a statement." "It's not about making a statement," I corrected gently. "It's about funding programs that align with our mission. The Wilson Foundation does good work in healthcare access, whatever I might think about your mother personally." He smiled, closing the distance between us. "And that right there is why you're succeeding. Where so many fail, you never lose sight of the actual mission." The Wilson Annual Charity Gala was the crown jewel of Boston's social season, an elaborate black tie affair that brought together the city's wealthiest families, corporate leaders, and philanthropic figures. In previous years, I'd attended as James's wife, tolerated rather than welcomed by Victoria, seated at peripheral tables far from the Wilson family's central position. This year would be different. As the primary sponsor, Horizon, and by extension I, would be featured prominently. Victoria had been surprisingly accommodating during the planning process, accepting each of my suggestions with minimal resistance. Whether this represented a genuine warming of relations or simply pragmatic recognition of Horizon's growing influence remained unclear. That evening, as our car pulled up to the Fairmont Copley Plaza, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and detachment. The Emma who had once craved Victoria Wilson's approval would have savored this moment as the ultimate victory. But somewhere along the journey of building Horizon, proving Victoria wrong had ceased to be a meaningful motivation. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed for the occasion, with elegant floral arrangements and subtle lighting creating an atmosphere of refined opulence. The Horizon logo appeared alongside the Wilson Foundation emblem on everything from the welcome banner to the cocktail napkins. Victoria greeted us at the entrance, impeccably dressed in a designer gown that probably cost more than my first car. "Emma, James, so pleased you could join us early for the patrons' reception." Her smile was practiced, perfect, revealing nothing of her true feelings. "The venue looks beautiful," I offered, genuinely impressed with the transformation. "Yes. Well, the event planners were particularly inspired this year." Her gaze flicked to the Horizon logo displayed prominently behind us. "The additional sponsorship funds allowed for certain upgrades." We moved through the reception, stopping frequently as various Boston elites approached to congratulate me on Horizon's success or inquire about potential collaborations. I noticed Richard deep in conversation with several hospital board members, discussing what appeared to be Horizon's latest expansion plans. Olivia and Bradley circulated among the younger crowd, Olivia occasionally catching my eye with what seemed like genuine warmth. As the evening progressed, I found myself momentarily alone at the edge of the ballroom. From this vantage point, I could observe the Wilson family in their element, confident, polished, moving effortlessly through social circles they'd navigated for generations. Yet now, surprisingly, I no longer felt like an outsider looking in. I had built something meaningful on my own terms, earned respect based on real impact rather than social pedigree. Quite a different perspective from 3 years ago, isn't it? Came a voice from beside me. Victoria had approached silently, champagne flute in hand. I turned, surprised by her direct acknowledgement of the change in circumstances. Yes, I agreed simply. It is. Victoria studied the room, her expression carefully neutral. When James first brought you home, I was concerned. The Wilson family has certain traditions, certain expectations. I couldn't see how you would fit into our world. It was the closest thing to an explanation, not quite an apology, that Victoria had ever offered. I never wanted to fit into the Wilson world, I replied honestly but without rancor. I wanted to build my own. She sipped her champagne, considering this. Yes, that has become rather evident. She gestured toward the Horizon logo prominently, displayed above the stage. And now your world and ours have developed a certain productive overlap. Before I could respond, the event coordinator approached, informing us it was time for the formal program to begin. Victoria nodded and moved toward the stage, her posture perfect, her social mask firmly back in place. The program opened with Richard's welcome address, followed by a video highlighting the Wilson Foundation's healthcare initiatives. Then came the moment that would have once seemed impossible. Victoria Wilson introduced me as the evening's honored guest and primary sponsor. Emma Chen's vision has transformed how patients connect with clinical trials, she stated, her voice smooth and practiced. Horizon Health Tech exemplifies the innovation and impact we seek to foster in the healthcare community. We are deeply grateful for their generous support of the Wilson Foundation. As I walked to the podium, the applause was genuine, even enthusiastic. I presented the ceremonial check, thanked the foundation for their meaningful work, and kept my remarks brief and focused on the shared mission of improving healthcare access. What I didn't say was how surreal it felt to stand on that stage, officially welcomed into a world that had once rejected me, not because I had finally changed to meet their standards, but because I had built something too significant to ignore. Following the presentation, dinner was served at elegantly appointed tables. James and I were seated at the center table with Richard and Victoria, a position of honor reserved for major donors and family patriarchs. As we dined on expertly prepared cuisine, I caught occasional glimpses of Victoria watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not resentment, not quite respect, but perhaps a reluctant recognition. Near the end of the evening, as guests began to depart, Victoria approached me once more. The donation was generous, she said, maintaining her composure. The foundation will put it to good use. I'm sure it will, I replied. The patient navigation program aligns perfectly with Horizon's mission. Victoria nodded, then hesitated, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. You've built something remarkable, Emma. Not what I would have expected, but... She paused. Impressive nonetheless. Coming from Victoria Wilson, this qualified acknowledgement was the equivalent of effusive praise. I smiled, neither triumphant nor bitter. Thank you, Victoria. As James and I left the gala later that evening, he took my hand. You know, I think that might have been the first time my mother has ever complimented you without adding a subtle dig. I laughed softly. Progress, I suppose. Does it matter? He asked, studying my face in the dim light of the car. Her approval, I mean. I considered the question honestly. 3 years ago, it would have meant everything. Now, I shook my head. It's nice, but it's not why I do what I do. Horizon exists to solve a real problem for real patients. The validation that matters comes from them, not from Victoria Wilson. James smiled, squeezing my hand. You know what the strangest part is? I think she actually respects that, in her own way. The following Monday, I was back at Horizon headquarters, immersed in planning our next phase of growth. The gala already felt distant, like a brief detour from the work that truly mattered. My assistant knocked on my office door, interrupting a strategy meeting with our product team. "Sorry to interrupt, but this just arrived for you," she said, handing me a small, elegant envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on Victoria Wilson's personal stationery. "Emma, the Foundation Board was impressed by your presentation and Horizon's commitment. Your insights regarding patient navigation have prompted a reevaluation of several of our program approaches. Perhaps you might consider joining the advisory committee for our healthcare initiatives. Your perspective would be valuable. Victoria." No effusive praise, no explicit acknowledgement of past misjudgments, just a pragmatic recognition of what I could contribute, phrased in Victoria's characteristically restrained manner. From her, it was practically a declaration of respect. I slipped the note into my desk drawer and returned to my meeting. There would be time to consider Victoria's invitation later. For now, my focus remained where it had always belonged, on building Horizon's future, on solving problems that mattered, on creating something meaningful regardless of who did or didn't approve. That evening, as James and I walked along the harbor near our loft, I shared Victoria's note with him. "Will you accept?" he asked. I looked out at the water, considering. Probably. Not to please your mother, but because the Foundation's work aligns with what we're trying to accomplish at Horizon. It makes strategic sense. James smiled. 3 years ago, you walked out of my parents' house when my mother said you'd ruined our lives. Now, she's inviting you to help direct her most prized philanthropic project. He shook his head in wonder. Life takes unexpected turns. It does, I agreed, thinking back to that painful night, to the uncertainty and hurt I'd felt. Though, I'm not sure this particular turn was entirely unexpected. Not the specifics, maybe, but the general direction. What do you mean? When your mother dismissed me at our wedding, she underestimated 2 things, I explained. First, that there are many different kinds of value beyond the narrow definitions she understood. And second, that being underestimated can be an unexpected advantage if you use it as fuel rather than accepting it as limitation. James considered this. And now? Now we've reached an equilibrium of sorts. Victoria recognizes what I've built. I recognize the value in some of what she's built. We don't need to be friends, but we can be allies where our goals align. I smiled at the simplicity of it. In the end, that's probably better than anything I could have forced through trying to fit into her world. As we continued our walk, the city lights reflecting on the dark water, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with Victoria's belated approval or Horizon's impressive valuation. The true victory wasn't in proving anyone wrong. It was in staying true to the vision that had driven me from the beginning, in building something meaningful on my own terms. That night, as I drifted toward sleep, I thought about the journey from that painful wedding reception to today. The path hadn't been straight or easy, but it had led somewhere authentic and worthwhile. Not to Victoria Wilson's grudging respect, though that had come eventually, but to something far more valuable. The knowledge that I had built something that mattered, regardless of who approved, and that, I realized, had been the real destination all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.